Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for coming and thanks for the opportunity to present here. We're, as ATE Solutions, represented at the forums up to this point, so it's really good to be seeing a bit more interest in that and meeting with some guys who are really into TestStand. So thanks for thinking of us and joining us in with that. So I wanted to talk to you, this is really going to be a quick fire presentation on operator interfaces for TestStand. So just to give you a bit of background on who we are and what we do, we're one of the UK's leading providers of automated test solutions. We tackle a broad range of product areas. Our specialism is really test. But what we find in what we do is that there's a significant common core to everything that we do. So although our customers are coming from very diverse and varied industries, in terms of production test, what we're wanting to do is use common blocks and reuse them as much as possible across applications. So that idea goes right through our design philosophy. We do that in the hardware and we do that in the software. So that's why I want to talk to you about how we've used FlexStand as a tool to help us to make our user interface kind of supportable and flexible. So there's a bit of information about us. We've got a number of trained NI engineers. We've got 2 sites in the UK and a lot of experience of building and selling ATEs. My role is that I'm a senior test development specialist within the company. I've been there for 15 years and lead a small team of application engineers who we're doing the electronic and software design for these applications that run on our Flex systems. And really the difference between them is one of scale. That's mainly the difference between them. So they start with small sort of Flex 10 systems going all the way up to the Flex 40. And it's really just a question of how much instrumentation you need in your ATE for your application. So that brings me to talking about the user interface that we use on the TestStand system. So I guess you're all aware that the editor environment isn't something that you want to be using on a production line. It's just far too complex for operators to get their heads around and just too much scope for them to go wrong with it. So that's a no-no. What you might do if you're building a user interface is you might start with the shipping examples. And what you realize is that they're actually quite complicated in terms of the code that sits behind them. So we did this when we first started out, and the limitations we quickly realized were it's going to take a lot longer to develop our user interface if we do it this way. It's not going to be particularly supportable because it's so complicated, and it's not actually going to be particularly feature-rich either because it's just taken so long to develop it. So that led us to explore what other options we had, and we found FlexStand, which is a tool offered by SIM Industrial Systems, who are it's actually a LabVIEW add-on, an award-winning LabVIEW add-on. And the first thing to note about it is it really hides a lot of the complexity of what you have to deal with in terms of the TestStand API that you've got to connect to build a user interface. So you've got these nice packaged kind of API calls for FlexStand that hide a lot of its complex code, which as someone who's building and configuring a user interface, you don't really need to know how that works. You just need a top level VI that's going to give you an execution view or a report view or something like that. So this is much more the level you want to be working at if you're building a user interface. So this is what it looks like in LabVIEW. They've wrapped a lot of these kind of complex API calls and callbacks into their own LabVIEW Palette, and it makes coding user interfaces a lot simpler. So in terms of how it works, it sits on top of the TestStand API and the TestStand engine, and it just sits there as an operator interface. What it also offers you, I'll come into it in a little bit more later on, offers you some customized plugins and some custom step types that you can use to connect to the UI. So just to explain the process you go through to build a UI using FlexStand. What it's got is this plugin architecture that splits mainly into a top, middle, and a bottom. And what it does is the main application on the top actually automatically resizes all of your 3 components and builds a single front panel that's correctly sized for your monitor from those 3. So you've got this ability to customize it in segments. What it then does is offers you this neat little box here, which is an integrated dialog. Let me just go back. So we use this for basically operator interaction. If they've got to input a serial number, or if we need to supply some information to the operator about what's happening during test, we use that dialog, and it actually becomes part of the user interface rather than kind of having pop-ups coming up during the test. You've got this dedicated area on your user interface. So, and again, there's support for that from TestStand. I'll show you that in a moment. Then as part of the plugin architecture, you've got tabs for your main screen. So effectively in a configuration file, you can define how many tabs you want to put on the main screen. You can have up to 10. So an example would be probably you want a main screen with an execution view, but we have a separate tab that's got our results view on it. Or if you want to put an editor on there, I'll show you that in a moment. So these are the custom step types that come with FlexStand. And as you can see, that makes the process of sending a UI message to your user interface very simple and intuitive from TestStand. Okay, so you've just got the main data types that you're likely to want to use for sending status updates to URI, just included, and you can just drag them in as step types. And that's an example of the FlexStand editor that we've added to some of our customizations. That is actually an out-of-the-box option that you can use. So that's one of the other benefits of going down the FlexStand route. There's a lot of features that come out of the box that you can just drag in, drop into your final application. So this does mean you've got the option of doing a bit of sequence editing from your final UI if you want to do that. And there's a couple of examples of some of the shipping UIs that you could start with to build your own customization on that. So just to finalize, I'll just point out some of the things we've done on our customization. That's our customization I'm showing you behind there. There's a little demo of it running at the back if you want to see more, if you want to see it actually working. But we've put this little results viewer there, so that's just a real-time display of every measurement we take during the execution of the test. We pop up the actual measurement and the value, and obviously.
Question. So does FlexStand actually extend the NI TestStand LabVIEW API, or is it a repackage? So is it basically a wrapper for the existing API, which I guess it must be?
Yeah, essentially it is that, but what it's doing is offering extra features on top of what that API would do. Yeah.
Cyril, does that answer your question? Waiting for something in the chat, or I think just continue for them.
But there are some user-defined templates and things for that. I mean, which then makes it much more easier for you to sort of get up to a working operating interface in no time, really. So
yeah.
So it is a packaged option, but there are things that help you extend it as well.
Yeah, there's a lot of tools that make it easy to work with. So this is just something we found people find useful. It gives you an instant visual indication of the status of your tester.
It's a quick question. How long did it take for you to build up this UI?
So that UI, I think I got the basics of that running in a week. And yeah, I think actually others might find they can do it quicker because as you noted at the beginning, my CLD's lapsed. I'm not the greatest coder, but yeah, it's not that difficult to work with. So yeah, that's one feature we've added. The other thing that you could just put on there is a basic yield stat so that we can track, customers like to see that, right? What's the yield on the tester? That's pretty easy to add in FlexStand. What else have we got? That's a little widget for selecting your program so that your operators don't go into a file explorer and then delete all your test programs. You can just have them select the program from, from a list. We drive that from configuration files. The UI knows what programs it can run and where to find them. That's just to illustrate there what API calls you would use if you want to programmatically hide tabs or programmatically switch to a tab during execution. There's API calls that do that. So we use that, for example, for locking out tabs to operators. So we've got here a debug tab and a settings tab. We lock those out unless you're logged in as administrator. Or also we lock them out while the test is executing. So people getting stuck somewhere they can't actually do anything useful. This is another feature we've added where basically it allows you to run a single test. So this would be, you need to have debug privileges to get into this page, but basically rather than running the whole test, sometimes on a production line you might want to have the ability to run a single test for diagnostics. And of course we've hooked into the TestStand API to give us the features like loop on test and stuff like that. So just to summarize what FlexStand does for you, it's very quick to learn, shortens your development time, gives you lots of out-of-the-box features, easy and powerful API to use. There's a few other features down there that we haven't particularly made use of, it's not been relevant to us, but just to make you aware that they're there. So there's language controls, and you can actually customize the menu that you get on the UI. So that was all I wanted to say about FlexStand, just to introduce it to you as a simple tool for making UIs that we found really useful. It's really helped us, so I wanted to share that with you. So any further questions on that?
I think at this point, we also need to say that it is a paid add-on.
Yes, I was. That's a good point. Yeah, I had got a slide about showing you. It's got different license levels. So runtime license is the basic license, which gives you all the features you need to run it. That's the cheapest license. I haven't got the figures about what that costs with me, but you're looking at a relatively small amount of money compared to the cost of building an ATE, right? So it's not expensive. The developer environment offers you a few more features and a few more examples. That costs you a bit more. But
the runtime. So you said runtime license. So does that mean you actually need to get a runtime license for every ATE that you build?
Yeah, but we're not talking masses. We're talking £200–300 roughly. I'm not. I'd have to get you the exact figure, but it's that kind of ballpark. Okay. So yeah, if you want to see it in action, have a look at the back.
Do you know if they've brought it up to date for 2019?
Not yet.
2017.
Yeah.
Oh, I've got here the numbers in the chat. Thank you, Patrice. So the runtime license is actually €800. The editor one is €1,500, and the developer one is €2,600.
Yeah.
So 800 plus the first test.
Yeah.
It's about the same cost as a TestStand license. So.
But then you also need TestStand license on top.
Absolutely.
Yeah. But you compare that to the cost of building an ATE, it's not.
We're talking about. So I agree that that's how it should be compared. But I've had people sort of protest against TestStand's one-time license cost.
Yeah.
So about £500 for when you compare a 20,000 ATE. So and so people do look at stuff like this. So really, the runtime should be cheaper. If anybody from CIM is listening.
There's another question here from Cyril. Do you provide tools to manage data and report files with basically what you deploy to your customers?
We do, but that's not part of FlexStand. So FlexStand is an operator interface. So we support another Fax, which is another SIM product which does that, but it's a very separate thing from FlexStand. Okay.
Any more questions?
What's been the general customer response on FlexStand?
Yeah, it's pretty good actually. So when I show, where is it? When I show that to customers and say this is our kind of base interface that we ship with our systems, 90% of the time they say, yeah, we'll go with that. Occasionally,
Every single customer we've sold a Flex system to now has FlexStand on it.
yeah, so everyone buys it. The only thing that happens with the other 10% is they might say, I need a few more widgets adding to it. I've got a particular thing, like for example, one customer, they use a factory database system. They wanted a little indicator on the UI to say when we're logged into that. So, there are various customizations that people require additional to that, but generally they say, yeah, this is exactly what we want.
In that case, thank you very much.
Thank you.